Good afternoon. I'm Mary Gray. I'm a distinguished professor of mathematics and statistics at American University here in Washington. I'm a latecomer to the field of statistics. I originally trained as a mathematician, and I did very abstract algebra. I worked in category theory when it was in vogue, and I worked in ring theory. But I discovered after a while that I was unlikely to do anything to change the world by studying mathematics. On the other hand, people ask me questions using probability and getting it, by the way, to using statistics. But I thought maybe statistics would be something that would at least seem to me to be more indicative of the work I might be able to do. So I switched from being a very abstract algebraist to being a very applied statistician. And I've been one ever since. I came to know about the Caucus for Women in Statistics a little later in the game. When I started out in mathematics, I started an organization called the Association for Women in Mathematics, which is also having its 50th anniversary this year. Once I decided to work in statistics, I got involved in a lot of different things. I worked on women's rights issues, and I found out that that was a way that I was able to use my statistical knowledge as well as my interest in statistics in general applied to social justice cases. The case that I always relate is when I was looking at my retirement benefits. My university had a retirement plan, still does for that matter. And I noticed that if I had the same amount of money invested in my retirement plan as a man who was similarly situated, when he retired, his income from the retirement plan would be 15% more than my income from the retirement plan. This was after 1964, when there was Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which said that with respect to wages and benefits in employment, it's illegal to illegal to discriminate on the basis of sex. So when I called the insurance company and asked what they thought they were doing, they explained to me, oh, they were discriminating on the basis of longevity, not on the basis of gender. And I said, looked to me like it was discrimination on the basis of gender. And they said, no, no, you have to understand women live longer than men. So I said, you can tell me that I'm going to live longer than any of my male colleagues? And they said, no, no, you just don't understand statistics. Well, by that time I did understand statistics and decided to do a little bit more about it. So I worked with some lawyers who were suing various insurance companies and state pension plans on the same basis. And this was a lot of fun because along the way we would get in conferences with the attorneys for the opposition, so to speak. And they finally allowed us out. Well, maybe I did understand statistics, but I just didn't understand the law. So I went to law school. And just to show you how tardy the system of justice can be in this country, by the time the court I was working on got to the US Supreme Court, I had managed to go to law school and finish my law degree and become a member of the Supreme Court bar. So not only could I write about the statistics, but I could actually write a brief in this statistics case. So I looked around for other things that I might do using statistics. I'd always volunteered in a variety of human rights causes and civil rights causes, but I discovered that I could also make a very useful way to do these using the statistics. I worked with Amnesty International. I worked with an organization called the American Middle East Education Foundation, and I got to know a lot about the Middle East, and certainly there are a lot of problems to work on there, whether they were with respect to statistics or something else. I worked for the American Association for the Advancement of Science, which also has projects, including one called Scientists on Call, where when they need some help, whether it's in statistics or chemistry or geography or whatever it is, they get volunteers to come and help problems. Statistics Without Borders also does that, which came along after the American Association for Advancement of Science, but nonetheless is very active in the field of using your statistics to make it a better world. So it turned out that it was a good choice to switch from algebra to statistics for me. Within the field of statistics, my department was lacking in anybody who was really interested in survey sampling. So that's what I tended to concentrate on along the way. That also has a lot of very useful applications. And of course, being in Washington, you have access to more statisticians than any place else in the world. So I was able to meet a lot of people, talk to a lot of people. when I went to meetings of the American Statistical Association or other meetings, Washington Statistical Society, for example, I was always looking for people to talk to, particularly since I came to the field relatively recently. And I found out that women were probably the easiest to talk to and get into a serious discussion of the statistics you might be interested in, but also some of the real world problems that went along with statistics, or more generally face those of us who are working in the field. So as I say, I enjoyed coming to the Caucus for Women in Statistics meetings. The meeting that I remember the most was when I was chairing the caucus. We had a meeting in Seattle, and what I remember about Seattle was it had lots of good talks at the meeting, had a great reception with good food, and Seattle has an opera that I could go to in my spare time. I'm a great fan of opera. One of the other things that I learned from being in mathematics was between my undergraduate school and my graduate school, I was able to spend a year on a Fulbright grant in Germany and came to know opera because you could go down to the opera house and for 25 cents, which was a mark at the time, get any tickets that they hadn't sold. So now I'm still looking for opera. Here it is in the middle of the pandemic, and I'm still looking for opera. I can see a lot of it streaming, but I'm looking for the ability to find a good statistics meeting in the same town with an opera that actually is being performed live. So I'm hopeful for this summer, but we'll see. Um, Question is, do female statisticians today still face the same problems as 50 years ago when the caucus was founded? And I think more or less that's true, but they've moved along the road a bit. I think now it's easier for beginning statisticians, be they men or women, to get a job. Uh, and because there are more statisticians jobs available than there are statisticians, there's not a lot of gender discrimination, not a lot of discrimination uh, in any case. Pay is pretty much equitable for men and women starting out, but when you run into trouble is when women become more senior. They get stuck at what we think of in academia as being stuck at an associate professor level, similar sort of mid-level positions in management or in research institutions. Move along so far, but when it comes to the very top, it's awfully difficult to get there. Sometimes that's because women have more responsibilities with childcare and what have you. Sometimes it's because they also get stuck doing things that are administrative in a not very productive way. There are lots of things that need to be done, but there are lots of things that tend to be time wasters. So I have two advice to women starting out in statistics. One is find yourself a good partner. I found out that that was very useful in my case, at least. And the other is learn when to say no, when to say yes, because you can be involved in some very exciting projects, volunteer or paid. There are good things to do, but you can also get involved in a lot of things that are nothing much more than a waste of time. So you need to learn to say no as well as to say yes, to avoid getting stuck at an associate professor level or some other similar sort of level. I think that things will probably are not going to be a lot of different in another 50 years. Very hard to make a prediction when we have trouble living from one month to another. What I would hope for is that there would be better equity in the sense of better provisions for childcare, but also a change of mind in the way people perceive things so that you don't expect women to do women's tasks and men to do men's tasks. And it turns out with women spending a lot of time on things that are not contributing necessarily to the profession, to their profession, and might not accomplish a lot either. There's always the story of when somebody wants to show you a new piece of equipment, makes a schedule, makes an appointment for a schedule, and then says, and when will your husband be there when the plumber comes or when the whoever comes? That's pretty discouraging. Um, Not too long ago, I was traveling out of London, and the security people were looking at my passport and what have you. And one of them said, "Oh, is your husband traveling with you?" And this was when my husband was still around, and I said no. And then the security person said, "Well, do you have his permission?" Now, given that the security people had probably come from a different part of the world, that was still a pretty discouraging question from my point of view. So that's about all I can tell you about how women still get treated. And I not necessarily think will be much better in 50 years. a thing that we all notice now is we enunciate some really good idea, we think, in a meeting, and nobody pays any attention. And then about 3 minutes later, the same idea is put forward by a man without giving any credit, of course. And suddenly everybody thinks it's the world's greatest solution to whatever the problem might be. So things could be better for women in statistics, but I've had a great time and I recommend it heartily for everybody else who just learned to say no.